Apologies for the short delay and welcome back. The very last panel is dedicated to state commitment to promoting gender equality with and for men. Before we give the floor to Rait Kuuse, who will be the moderator of the panel, we'd like to invite you to take part in a small quiz. Please click on the task button next to this panel in the agenda. And the question is, if there were no societal stereotypes on what it means to be a real man, how many dollars would be saved from negative health and social outcomes in the United States alone? And this is according to a Promunda study from last year. You should be seeing 4 different options there. First one being $157 million US dollars. The second one, $1.57 billion US dollars. The third one, $15.7 billion US dollars, and the fourth one, $157 billion US dollars. So different numbers. Have a guess, or maybe you know it already, but don't be shy to answer this question, so we can just see how informed you are or what your best guess is. Let's see.
So that seems to be
3 answers and
at least a bit of variety now.
Yeah, no consensus on this topic.
Yeah.
It's changing really fast. So 157 billion US dollars seems to be the most popular.
Actually, it was tied for a second with 15.7 there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just good to get your thoughts going, and you might get an answer to it in the next panel as well.
Mm-hmm. So it seems that the largest number seems to be the most popular at the moment.
Yeah.
We'll see if you got it right or not. Do we have a prize?
We
to all of those who guessed right?
I'm not sure. I think not. The prize is just this satisfaction of getting it right, and that's something.
Yeah, I guess that's something. I mean, it's a usual pub quiz, meaning that either there is no prize or it's meaningless.
Yeah, and yes, and maybe you will remember this fact really well now after this quiz.
That was actually the main point of it, for you to think about it and then see if you got it right or not.
Yeah, so we won't even tell you the right answer, but I'm convinced you will get the answer from the next panel.
Yes. Thank you, all of those who took part in this small quiz. Now it's my pleasure to give the next session over to Rait Kuuse. Rait Kuuse is the Deputy Secretary General on Social Policy in the Ministry of Social Affairs in the Republic of Estonia. So the floor is yours, Rait.
Hello, welcome to Estonia, also from the Ministry of Social Affairs side. And I'm happy to see that you have found some time to watch our panel, which indeed is the last panel today. We have very distinguished panel members, but before that, we really miss you visiting Estonia. It is very beautiful autumn rainy day outside here, and it's kind of common for Estonia, and I hope that at some point also you can attend and enjoy it with us. As said, we have the panel in front of us, the name of it, which is State Commitment to Promoting Gender Equality with and for Men. And I'm really looking forward to have those lively discussions. As we have only 60 minutes to deliver, I'm not going to spend much time to speak by myself, and would like to start with introducing you the distinguished speakers, but also I would like to emphasize that all the questions, thoughts and reflections on the presentation and also on the panel panel contributions are well received, and then we try also to incorporate your input to our today's short discussion. So very shortly, who we have here. First, Mr. Gary Barker. Then we have here Ralf Kass. Then Dr. Katarina Kreschuk from Germany. Then next, Karin Strandos from Sweden. Charles Ramsden from UK, from Council of Europe. And finally, Lopa Banerier from UN Women. So welcome our all distinguished speakers and panel members. I'm looking forward to our today's exchange. Then I think that I already mentioned we also encourage the audience to present their ideas and questions towards us, and we try to incorporate them into discussion. So in very Estonian manner, I will not speak very long, and we go straight to the business, and we start with the first presentation. I would like to give floor to Mr. Gary Barker for his presentation, Privilege, Power and Cost, Acknowledging the Complexity of Male Allyship in Gender Equality Policies. Gary, please, floor is yours. Gary, please, may I give you the floor?
Thanks very much, and including me in the ICMEO, the privilege. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, indeed.
Yes. How's the transmission going now?
From my point here, it seems to go well.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I'm sliding. Pull those up. There we go. Fantastic. Thanks for this participating in the ICMEO events, and although it's not being there in person, thanks including me. The conversations have been rich and important not only for Europe but for the rest of the world. So I want to talk about these complexities as we think about stepping into policies. Where are men on gender equality, and in that complexity, how can we understand some ways for not only developing better policy, but also in getting men on board with them? I believe if I press that, do I get to the head there? There we go. Where are men on gender equality? I'll start with a question. Profundo is partnered with another organizations to carry out the images or intervey on the Norwegian study in there looks kind of like one of the younger men generally abstractly gender equality rate other generations of men, but that change living back and some of the problems part of men political stability talk about. And then we've got lots of generation of men buying into gender equality. So obviously a negative aspect, what we can call toxic masculinity, can be quite common. We child play. That means men who see their fathers be involved in the care of children often do the same when they're adults and have if they do. And violence, particularly violence in the home, is probably
Gary, I'm very sorry to intervene here.
Adult use
Gary,
of multiple
please.
forms of.
We have some issue with the connection now, and it seems to me that not everything what you are speaking is not going through without trouble. So may I propose the following, that we try to go to the panel discussion, and then technicians in between try to solve the connection issues, and then we return to your presentation. I'm very sorry for that happening at the moment, but it seems that other way around would not work very well for the audience as well. Are you agreeing with me?
Yes, absolutely. Apologies for that. I'm in.
No. It's not your issue.
In my hometown. So.
Yeah, sorry for that. Those things happen even in our very well advanced world, which uses a lot of technology.
Okay.
But let's try to solve it, and we go to the panelist like before, and then change a little bit our order of this panel. So thank you for being patient, and then let's try to solve this issue there. Okay, so I would like to start our discussion then, and then let's hope that the connection issues will be solved soon, and we can return to the presentation as well. Well, we are missing also one participant in our panel, as I see, Ralf. So I would like to pose first a question to Katariina from Germany. Katariina, Germany was the first country hosting ICMEO conference. Now Germany is leading European Union at the moment and has strong presidency program. What is your ambition regarding gender equality, and more precisely topics discussed at our conference? What would you expect to achieve by the end of the year?
Thanks, Right. Do you understand me?
Yes, very well.
Good. Okay. First of all, I would like to thank you to take part of this very interesting conference. Please thanks all colleagues from Estonia. It is really inspiring and really interesting. Now to your question. Gender equality is a key priority of the Federal Ministry and during Germany's presidency of the Council of the European Union. So we are deeply convinced that we have to think about the cooperative approach of gender equality policy. And that means that we have both parts, both groups in our perspective, the men and the women. And we will, in this perspective, we will work hard during the presidency of the Council to ensure that gender equality on the labour market is improved. This is our first priority. For this reason, we will put matters relating to gender equality on the labour market on the agenda of the EBSCO meeting on 13th October 2020. And in addition, we are preparing Council conclusions on tackling the gender pay gap, which aim to combat imbalances on the labour market by promoting a gender equal evaluation and distribution of paid work and unpaid care work. And this has also a male perspective. And we want to adopt the conclusions of the EBSCO meeting on 3rd December 2020. The second priority regarding gender equality is the protection of women and girls from violence. But we also face the perspective of men and boys from violence. The social distancing rules in place during the coronavirus pandemic shows again the importance of a stable, resilient, and easily accessible support system. We support the ratification of the Istanbul Convention by the EU and further EU member states so that women in all of Europe can live free from violence. In this regard, there will be an informal meeting of the EU gender equality ministers in Potsdam in the near of Berlin on 19th and 20 November, if the COVID-19 pandemic circumstances allow it. Our minister would like to discuss, among the other things, measures we can take to improve the protection of women from violence in Europe. For example, there is a big concern to establishing a Europe-wide single phone number under which the national violence against women helplines can be reached. This is for the moment.
Thank you very much, Katariina. I would just go further from here, what do you generally think about EU's role at the global level? Could the EU do better?
Do you mean we as Germany?
EU as a whole, as a union.
Yes, yes, we can do better because it's a big partnership inside the EU, and if we would have the same opinion to some things, we have a big role, and we can convince other countries. So yes, it's a very interesting and important role for the EU.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. I would move now on to Karin from Sweden. And previous ICMEO conference has been held in Stockholm, and we really appreciate that you handed over the possibility or opportunity to have the current conference in Tallinn. We know that your country is well developed in terms of the policies regarding gender equality, and it is a kind of, I would say, role model for many other countries as well. So could you perhaps remind us what was the main outcome of your conference, main messages perhaps, and has the conference itself triggered some new thinking or some developments in your own country?
Thank you very much, and thank you for organizing this year's ICMEO conference. And I'm very happy to be here on the panel as well. It's a very interesting program and important issues that are being discussed these days. We hosted the conference 2 years ago in Stockholm, and as a feminist government, we were of course very happy to do so. Our long-term goal for the Swedish gender equality policy is that women and men have the same power to shape society and their own lives. And to reach that goal, women and men and girls and boys need to have access to resources and power on equal terms. And men need to be included and take part in that work. And I think one of the main outcomes of the ICMEO conference that we organized here was that we saw a push forward, because we saw that civil society and other actors were really active during the time in the debate challenging norms. So I think it fed a lot of inspiration and also a common will to act. And we are working very hard in Sweden to establish our infrastructure on gender equality, I would say. The same year as the conference was held in Stockholm, we established our National Gender Equality Agency. And they have a very important task to work on these issues, gender equality and in all the aspects, but also how to include men and boys in this work. So that's one important, very important measure that was taken the same year. And also I think we established really interesting joint mission together with the Swedish Association of Local Authorities and Regions, where we are working together both from the government side and the local level on how can we strengthen the work on men, boys and masculinity at the local level in municipalities. And we also promote, of course, civil society's work with men and boys, because that's really also key. So I think we've seen both really important sort of infrastructural reforms, but also concrete things which are more sort of actions that are experienced at the local level, such as more bystander programs with gender approaches in schools, more gender awareness in sports and organized spare time activities, and also at the local level, better structures and organization of the work, which I think is really important. So that's a few of the things we've been focusing on and have been able to achieve since the last conference.
Thank you very much. I have just one perhaps additional question to you as well, that, well, how difficult in Sweden do you believe it is to bring men and boys also to the picture of the gender equality debate? Is it, has it been always very easy for you, or have there been certain, let's say, moments which have really brought that issue more to the picture?
Well, I think maybe my fellow panelists have another view, but I think that achieving progress on gender equality is sort of never an easy process. And it doesn't come for free, but it's a lot of hard work to achieve progress. And I think also, as you all know, we are living in times where I think we've never taken success for granted, which is very important, but I think we are feeling also that when it comes to gender equality, these important questions of human rights are also being challenged. And we have to play defense also, as well as working for progress as the times are now. So not an easy process, but I think here again, I mean, as a state secretary, of course, I have to highlight the importance of political leadership and really prioritizing gender equality in our key processes, such as gender budgeting, gender mainstreaming. But I also think that when it comes to this regard, civil society has been key. It's awareness raising is such an important issue here, and also to sort of inform people about how it's a win-win-win to work on gender equality, and how we are seeing in society today that boys are achieving less in school than girls. Men are subject to both use violence more, but also are subjected to violence. So there's a lot in this toxic masculinity that we need to address, and that it's a common win. So I would say not easy. It doesn't go by itself, but I think we are making progress. But in the global era we are living in now, I think we also see some backlashes and some sort of pockets where men who don't feel included in sort of the general progress in society are sort of choosing another path, and I think that's a challenge we really have to address.
Thank you very much. Indeed, it's very interesting debate. I think that one perhaps aspect, if we have time, we could return to is working at the local level, working with the municipalities, with the municipality leaders, and so on, which is very, let's say, crucial here in Estonia as well. Charles, may I turn to you and ask a question from you? So you have a role to play at Council of Europe, and what characterizes or distinguishes countries who have stronger commitment towards gender equality, and how Council of Europe has and is contributing to the men's roles, opportunities, and participation in the gender equality debate? Charles, could you unmute yourself? We don't hear you, we see you well. No, not yet. It's on? Okay, we cannot hear Charles at the moment, so we have to move on and then turn to Charles back as well. Lopa, you probably are the person here who has the best sense of global picture of gender equality challenges. Are there any trends to be watched and any opportunities to be used, in your opinion? And has the global situation changed for better? And are more men part of the problem or part of the solution? And again, we don't hear you. Can you unmute yourself? Okay, I was hoping that technical challenge is less. Okay. No, we don't hear you, sorry. Okay, are we okay with Charles or not? Okay, so we can actually return back to the question of local level issues because we have some connection technical problems. So I would turn to Katrin and also to Karin to continue with our debate. So this is the era of technology we are living in, and we have to be very, very flexible. Well, first, Katrin, how would you say that from the German experience, is it only the focus on the national strategies at that kind of central government functions and also advocating for the gender equality issues, or how do you reach to your level of regions, local level, also level of civil society? So what is your experience there?
Germany is structured very federal.
Yes.
Do you understand me?
Yes, very well.
Because, okay. And for this reason, the responsibilities are divided on these levels, and it's very important to speak with this different levels on local level, on Länder level, on region level, to get a comprehensive strategy for gender equality, and it's for the group for women the same how to the group of men. So for us, for Germany, that's very important. And if you need, if you want stronger sustainability for the policy, for the gender equality policy, so you have to yes, to work on all levels.
Thank you very much, Karin. I have a question to you as well, because here in Estonia as well, we let's say seek different ways of how to collaborate, how to work, how to raise the commitment from the side of different stakeholders. And you have mentioned civil society is a key. You also have mentioned that one of your strategic focuses is on working at the municipality level. So how does this succeed in your opinion? Has there been, again, any good examples perhaps to share with us?
Well, sometimes I think I sound too much like a boring bureaucrat because I think I always talk about trying to institutionalize and find structures and find the most important sort of processes in government and to sort of infiltrate them with gender equality, because I think that's how you get results. When it comes to, I mean, as in Germany, as Katrin was saying, of course, the division of power is also it's divided. So what we're doing from the government side is that we are working together with the municipalities. They have an organization where they work together, and we have formal agreements that where we work together and support the local level work that they are doing. But of course, without sort of they have their own way of doing that. And what has been really successful, I think, in Sweden is this organization's work with, they call it model municipalities, that's my translation, but where they sort of share examples and have a really good cooperation between municipalities on how they can gender mainstream their own work and find ways on making improvements. So I think that's been a good success, and they've made good progress in many different topics. One example also, which is included in in that program is work on violence prevention. Violence prevention is one of the areas where we focus a lot on men and boys involvement, because of course we have to work preventive, but also to work more on, we have been focusing a lot in Sweden, which is really, really important, on supporting the women and girls who are subjected to violence, and we need to continue to do that. But what we're trying to do now is to focus also more on violence prevention and involve men and boys in that work. And here we have some municipalities which are doing a great job at also school levels with different programs on and methods on how can we stop violence and prevent violence from happening. So I think that's one example. But finding good ways of cooperation and sort of infrastructure and agreements, I think, is key.
Thank you very much. So I think that we have Charles back on air. Charles, can you confirm that?
I hope you can hear me now.
Yes, well and sound. So I would repeat my question just for a moment, and then you can perhaps answer and share your thoughts as well. I hope that you also had the chance to listen how we evolved our discussion here. So you have a role to play at Council of Europe. So I'm really keen to understand that what characterizes or distinguishes countries who have stronger commitment towards gender equality, and how Council of Europe is contributing to the men's roles, opportunities and participation in the gender equality debate. So please, if you could share your thoughts.
Well, thank you. I'd be very happy to. And I'm very pleased that you can now hear me. I'm assuming the problems were at my end, because I know how advanced Estonia is on all things digital and tech. And we're very envious of some of the facilities and resources that you have. But yes, thank you for the chance to speak to you today. So we do feel that it's possible to tell those countries that have a strong commitment to gender equality, because there's a number of things that we can see that they do. They are do some positive things which demonstrate their commitment. And these will include things like putting forward legislative and policy initiatives to make progress on the path towards gender equality, including strong measures to ensure gender balance in decision making. The fact is, we know that gender equality isn't going to happen organically, or at least not until we've waited a very long time. So it's important that countries actually commit to doing something positive. They also need to allocate an adequate level of resources to deliver gender equality. They need to ensure that there's responsibility for it, that ministries have the capacity and the resources and are encouraged to do their bit. They have to put in place specialised and well-funded national institutional mechanisms on gender equality, which need to have strong institutional authority, often led by a minister, and we would like to see a minister at the most senior levels of government. As Karin mentioned earlier, they have to put in place the necessary conditions, which can be expertise, resources, the right people, to mainstream gender equality throughout all public institutions and policies. And the final thing I would mention is that it's so important to have an active and meaningful dialogue and cooperation with civil society organisations, and especially, of course, women's organisations. They have so much to contribute, so much expertise, and if we can tap into that, then that's a very strong way of ensuring progress. And of course, that's all particularly relevant now, as the way that countries deal with the impact of COVID-19 on gender equality will be critical as we build back better and ensuring that equality between women and men is a reality. And I would just like to say that we'll be discussing this very issue with the Gender Equality Commission, that's our representatives from 47 member states. The Greek presidency are hosting a seminar on this next month, and we're looking forward to having some meaningful discussions there. And one other thing that countries can do, those who are committed to achieving gender equality, they can play a leading role by showing others that certain measures are effective in achieving gender equality and showcasing their good work so that others can learn from it. Now, the Council of Europe is, as you know, a Strasbourg-based organisation focused on democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. And we have a gender equality strategy. It's a 5-year strategy, and it talks quite a bit about the role of men and boys. For example, it notes that both women and men are victims of stereotypes, and this restricts their full capabilities. It notes that the involvement of men and boys is critical to the achievement of gender equality, and that policies that are developed by countries should also address gender-related inequalities that affect men and boys, even though, of course, we should remember that historically based unequal share of power and resources between women and men still remains an issue. So the sort of things that we are looking at include the significance of maternity and paternity leave and the role of both parents in the upbringing of children and of both women and men as carers of adult dependents. I'm sure we're going to talk today about the equal sharing of unpaid household and care work and the necessity of breaking down gender stereotypes there. We note that involving men is critical in both the public and private spheres, and that men can be important agents of change. And again, we come back to this business about stereotypes of male, which we think that those stereotypes need to be overcome to free men and boys from the pressures of the stereotyped expectations that they face. And indeed, we've done some work to begin to tackle this already. So last year, the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe adopted a recommendation on preventing and combating sexism, which notes that gender stereotypes and inherent biases shape the norms, behaviours and expectations of men and boys, and can therefore lead to sexist acts. So the elimination of sexism and sexist behaviour will benefit everyone, women and girls, men and boys. And that recommendation also lists a set of awareness-raising measures that should be used by member states in order to prevent and combat sexism. And that covers a whole range of sectors, for example, education, the internet and social media, the content of books, comics, television, and so on. And in the coming year at the Council of Europe, our work plan includes resources set aside for the preparation of studies and analyses of good practice on the engagement of men and boys in promoting gender equality. And this is something that we're all very much looking forward to. And of course, will have been informed by this conference that we've had for the last day and a half. And on that basis, I'm very pleased to have been here and to have learned a considerable amount already. So I'll leave it there for now. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to engaging with the panel later.
Thank you very much, Charles. It seems that Council of Europe in that subject is also a very good pool of knowledge and exchange. So I hope that you can share further on your knowledge about this. But I believe that now our technical problems are more or less solved and we have Lopa back. Is that true?
I hope so. Can you hear me?
Yes, well and sound. And now, please, if you could, you give your perspective and your this global understanding of gender equality debate and the men's and boys' role in there. And are the men's more a problem on the problem side or more on the solution side nowadays? So how it has evolved? What is your feeling there or your knowledge there, not feeling?
Thank you so much. And first of all, let me congratulate Estonia on the chairship of ICMEO this year. And thank you very, very much for inviting UN Women and me to this panel. I'm delighted to join all of you on this for this discussion. Can you still hear me well?
Yes, indeed.
Okay, good. Okay, very good, because I actually cannot see you anymore. I'm only seeing myself, so I'm a little discombobulated. But just to start off, respond to your question, yes, absolutely, things have changed quite dramatically in the last several years. Let's say if we look at the last 25 years, since the adoption of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, we have definitely seen change. For example, if you consider a 15-year-old girl in a developing country today, she has many more opportunities than her counterpart did 25 years ago. Compared to previous generations, she is much less likely to live in poverty and has a much better chance of growing up healthy and nourished. Because there has been quite significant shifts in laws and policies and social norms that have changed the world around her, she is more likely to finish primary school, less likely to marry young and have children before she wants them, and more likely to fulfill her aspirations. But listen to the words that I'm using. Likely to, more likely to, less likely to. I am not saying she is and she will. And that's because the facts still are that she will be fighting against odds, because progress, while there has been progress, has been incremental, uneven, insufficient, and fragile. Poverty and discrimination and violence are still strongly present in the lives of women and girls, and underrepresentation in power and decision making is the norm. I'm going to share some statistics with you. Men across the world, men are 75% of parliamentarians. They hold 73% of managerial positions. They are 70% of climate negotiators and almost all of peace negotiators. Equality isn't just 1/4 of the seats at the table, but that is the current state of women's representation across different sectors. If we look at the gender gap in labor force participation, it has remained unchanged between 1998 and 2018 at 31%. And women remain concentrated in precarious labor, in insecure labor, and in fragile labor. Of course, women carry a disproportionate share of unpaid care work, performing more than 3 times as much unpaid care work as men. And let me come to violence, which is one of the most horrifying statistics. The 2020 report of the UN Secretary General on gender equality, 25 years after Beijing, found that 18% of women aged between 15 and 49 years who had intimate partners had been subject to sexual or physical violence by these partners in the previous 12 months. In many countries, that figure rises to 24%. And more than 2.5 billion women and girls are affected by discriminatory laws and the lack of legal protections that leave them without any legal basis to claim their rights in the countries in which they live. And as panelists before me have said, and on top of all of this, we are seeing powerful pushback with damaging reversals of hard-won gains, particularly in the area of sexual and reproductive health and rights. So we are nowhere near achieving gender equality. In fact, there is not a single country in the world that has achieved gender equality. And now, with the impact of COVID, we are not only talking about sluggish progress, we are actually talking about reversal. Sectors in which women represent the vast majority of the workforce, including retail, hospitality, tourism, have been shut down. And many feminist economists are saying that the unlikely recovery of these industries could set back gender equality by a generation. gender-based violence has increased 30%. So we already had a situation of 18% to 24% in the world. In 5 months since COVID has started, gender-based violence has gone up by 30%. So what this points to is the fragility of the measures that we have put in place, that it can be so easily eroded by conditions in the environment. Unpaid care work, overloaded health systems and healthcare systems, the burden of care on women and girls as a result of COVID has increased manifold. And women are playing a disproportionate role in responding to the pandemic as caregivers. They are 70% of healthcare and social sector, social care workers, and yet they comprise only 30% of the leaders in the global health sector. So where we are right now is that COVID has exacerbated the existing inequalities and the existing fault lines to an extent that unless we take dramatic steps now, we are not only not going to be achieving gender equality, but we are actually going to see reversal of many, many years of work. So at this point in time, with regard to the role of men and boys, and particularly men, I'm actually really going to talk about men in leadership, because men in leadership have to start using their leadership better. The fact that men are in the majority in decision-making, in defining policy agendas, in defining resources, in defining investments, their role in center staging gender equality in policy, in resources, in investment is absolutely critical. And this is not, and their role at this point in time in terms of the leadership role that men are playing is simply not enough. You know, it's not enough to wear a t-shirt that says, I am a feminist, because what is really needed right now from men in leadership is feminist actions that look at, number one, zero tolerance on gender-based violence. Actions and policies that are looking at zero tolerance. Actions and policies that are making gender-based violence services essential services, because it is essential in the lives of women and girls. And that men in leadership are taking active measures to promote and support women in leadership positions alongside them. I'm going to stop here for the moment and continue later. Thank you.
For this overview, of course, I have to say that I'm now more worried than I was before you reflected that back, but it is pretty obvious that at the time of crisis, you really need to think it through, that what kind of implications it has also on the gender equality issues. And you need to perhaps even protect more certain principles and focuses. I believe that we have also Ralph back with us. Is that true? Can you make a sound?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, very well. I'm really glad that you could join us. Sorry for all this trouble, but I would really like to kind of give you a floor as well and ask you some questions as well. So you have experience of organizing third ICMEO conference, I believe. So you have also focused on issues of care, which was previously also here mentioned. Has the content of policy discussion changed much from the time of your conference, and where do you see the most of the progress, or where you see the most of the setbacks?
Well, thank you very much for having us. My apologies, my deepest apologies for joining so late. I don't know on which side the problems were, but finally I made it. I'm very glad to be there. Congratulations also to Estonia for having organized this conference and keeping up the spirit of ICMEO, which was a bit created 4 years back in Luxembourg. And as you mentioned well, we organized the third conference on men and equal opportunities. And for us, it was a huge step, I have to say, to organize a conference in this size, but also considering the content of the conference. We've walked a long way from being a ministry of de la promotion féminine, also fighting for women's rights, to become a ministry of equal opportunities, and then now we are a ministry of equalities between women and men. And traditionally, we started with very classical subjects as violence, gender pay gap, and so on, and more focused towards women and girls. And back 2011, we started to reflect, okay, would it be appropriate to integrate men and boys more into gender equality policies? Are there discriminations or inequalities or social phenomena where men are more affected than women? And is it the term of gender equality policy? Is it the right term if we direct our policies only towards women and girls? And there we started to what other countries are doing in their gender equality policies. And we traveled to Berlin, we traveled to France, to Belgium, to Holland, in order to see if they have integrated the male perspective in gender equality policy, and to see if there are any offices where men in distress can go in order to get help, and so on. And if there are lobby organizations in these countries, in order to see if such, I wouldn't say a switch, but such a complement in gender equality policy is possible in Luxembourg. And back 2016, when we organized the conference, it was very important for us to choose a subject which makes the male perspective in gender equality policy more tangible and more visible, and to not put an emphasis on these traditional gender equality issues, such as violence, for instance. But we wanted to wanted to choose a more positive subject, like caring masculinities. And
Ralph, please, I would like to intervene just for a moment. I think, Karin, you have other commitments to come, and you need to leave our discussion here. So big thank you for participating and giving your experiences and very concrete examples. And once again, thank you for handing over the conference to us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, so bye-bye, and we continue. Sorry, Ralph. Let's go further on with your thoughts.
Yes. Well, it was very important for us to choose a subject which makes it more visible and more tangible. What do we mean by integrating men in gender equality policies? And the caring aspect was a subject that was perfect to illustrate that. To your question,
the question that how much at that time you were talking about the men and boys in that regard, in terms of the care. So was that kind of, mentioned, or was that really a topic?
I mean, it was really a topic. I mean, the conference was structured by we organized 6 workshops. Which were really based on care work at home, care of elderly people, care professions, taking care of yourself, gender medicine, and all these aspects. I mean, it was really focused on that theme, and it was a revelation for many people attending the conference who were skeptical, because we have to say that there was in the Luxembourg Society and also in all the organizations dealing with gender equality policy, there was some kind of opposition, or at least some skeptical comments about, well, what the ministry is going to do there. I mean, it's a bit bizarre that they are going to organize such a big conference on just men and gender equality and blah blah blah. And it needed some discussions, and the conference helped indeed to change a bit the mentalities and to see, well, yeah, on that point you are right. We need more men in care work. We need work-life balance is also an aspect for men and boys, and also working on stereotypes. It is something that concerns men and boys as well. So it has helped to come into a discussion and to change at least a bit the mentalities. And to your more concrete question, if it has what has changed over the last 4 years, well, that's difficult to measure. We feel that I think it's more easier to raise subjects like that when you have a project. For instance, we have a project in order to promote more boys to become social worker, for instance. So, and also networking has become more easier to, and also association with women organization to see, well, maybe we can work together. Maybe we have common interests, and why not working on that? And so I think it has changed the climate a bit of gender equality policy.
Very good to hear. Very good to hear. And thank you for your contribution here. May I turn to the questions from the audience? So do we have any reactions there? So please, could you share some of them, and then we seek for the address from the panel.
Yes, actually, I think there is a flood of questions here. It seems that people are trying to get the last out of this conference and are really actively posing questions and upvoting them. The first one concerns the current state of the world and, well, not the most positive side of it. So the question basically is, how does the rise of populism and anti-feminism, especially in the political scene, in national parliaments as well as the European Union level, for example, also United Nations, how does it actually affect our commitments? So I guess you could answer in a way that, well, it doesn't affect them at all, it affects them a little, delays might be possible, or you could also answer, well...
It's very difficult to see a positive effect there.
Yeah, but the question is, what is the impact of it, I guess? Like, to which extent does it actually deter us or prevent us from achieving what we've set out to do?
Yeah, or this discussion is perhaps even a normal, let's say, momentum at the moment, which we just have to, embrace somehow. So who would like to contribute here from the panel? Lopa, please.
Thank you. I think that's actually a really important question because, there are some spaces, typically you would think that institutions or spaces, policy-making spaces, international spaces which are human rights institutions or which uphold standards for gender equality, social justice, plurality, that these are standard setting, standard making, standard implementation spaces, global policy making about setting standards. But it's exactly in these spaces that the rise of populism and the pushback that we see is taking place. So we have policymakers, we have member states, we have countries which are rolling back existing gains, which are rolling back conventions, accepted standards. And so so in addition to the fact that pre-COVID, progress was slow. Not it has because that it had not been sustained enough, because we had not seen enough systemic change, and there was this pushback that had started with populism. So we've actually seen regression. We have seen regression on gender equality, for example, in sexual and reproductive health and rights. We have seen regression on gender-based violence, where countries which had adopted international conventions and their own national legislation, there's been pushback. We've seen countries which had earlier introduced legislation against early marriage have now reduced the age of marriage, and so early marriage is on the rise. So there's actual tangible impact of the rise of populism and the pushback on gender equality.
We need to focus on holding the commitment and reminding us that where the commitment has been, and then these also during the times like we are experiencing today. But here I would like to ask whether Gary is back with us now at the end of our panel. Gary, could you say something?
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes, and actually very well. So now we have reached almost the end of the panel. I'm very sorry for that. I don't know what happened, and but here we are with this, and we have to embrace the situation as well. So we can show your presentation, I believe. We don't have your video, but if you could make your presentation even a bit shorter, 7-8 minutes,
Sure.
And in order for us also to perhaps a little react to those. I'm very sorry for this inconvenience.
No, I'm apologies as well that I'm not at my home, so the connection was not mine to work on. I just I will shorten it because I had a chance to hear some of the comments, but I think where are we in terms of engaging men in gender equality? I think we've heard several presentations during the course of yesterday and earlier today around the backlash, and we do see it in multi-country surveys that we've carried out, and particularly finding a lot of this contradiction of many young men supporting gender equality in the abstract, but still believing and pulling into a harmful version of masculinity or toxic masculinity. And I think the other truth that we've seen from looking across more than 45 national surveys is just how much early experiences of what boys see in the home, whether involve fatherhood or whether they see violence coming from a male in the home, how much those play ahead. And I think we've not used that very much to think about our policies. And then finally, I think we also need to look at the fact that when men support gender equality, they tend to be happier and healthier when they buy into these other versions of manhood. And I think that's something we need to pull out as well and to use in terms of promoting our policies. The next slide, please. I can't control them from here, so if you can click on there. One of the things that we have tried to do is to make visible the harm to men themselves, and particularly to young men, as we see a lot of backlash coming from that direction. This survey that we carried out called the Man Box of young men ages 18 to 30, partners in the US, Mexico, UK, Australia, Jamaica, finding that some 30 to 40% of young men fall into what we call this harmful version of masculinity, of only being able to show anger, using force to get what they want, not showing vulnerability, believing they're always in charge. At the same time, lots of those young men buying into gender equality, again, in the abstract, thinking women are their equals. Next slide, please. But what we find is that the more you're in the box of those 40%, of men that I mentioned, more or less, you're more likely to have thought about suicide, to have drink in harmful amounts, to have been in traffic accidents, to show depression, to use violence, to experience violence, and also to use violence against women and girls at very high rates, such that we have enough data to say, look, we should call this out for what it is. It's harmful to our health as men, and it's harmful to the health of women. Now, interestingly, one thing is that the guys who are in the box are also more likely to say they're happy. So I think this goes to some of the points that Christian made yesterday, which is that men are finding some sense of I'm living up to what the world expects of me if I'm in the box. So again, we've got the challenge of how to help men see this huge contradiction. Next slide. one of the ways that we've tried to also, and if you could just click on to the next one, and this was the answer to the question from the beginning, we also did a health economics analysis of this, of the population attribution that we can say how much of health costs, lost life, and lost work are associated with these harmful norms. And just among young men ages 18 to 30, that is not the wider population of men, and just across those 6 health outcomes that I mentioned, the cost came, and if you'll click on to the next one, it should come up. It came to nearly 16 billion US dollars. To put that in perspective, that is about the budget of our Centers for Disease Control in the US in pre-COVID times. That is more than the NBA makes in revenue. That is the National Basketball Association. In the UK, it came up to about 4 billion US dollars, which is more than the Brits spend on tea every year. So it's a huge cost, at least, that we can say is associated with being kind of believing into these harmful norms. And I think these are important to help bring the cost to men themselves of harmful ideas about masculinity and hold out a promise of healthier, more connected masculinity. Next, please, and I want to move quickly because I know we're a little bit behind. I think we've got a challenge of how to convince the younger generation, and these are obvious data that we have there in the EU, that gender equality hasn't been achieved. And I think we see the fatigue from some men saying, oh, we've done this forever, we've achieved it, and whether data from several countries in Europe showing that up to half of young men or men think that gender equality has come too far. So I think we've got a challenge of how to make the case that no, in fact, we're not done with it, and we need to continue to do work on it that's not just kind of vaguely making noise about it with a few male champions. We need bigger action that continues to convince and engage men on this. Next one, please. And try to get toward closing. I think Christian did a fantastic job yesterday of talking about really the most angry men. But I think the issue is not just to focus on the most extremes of that, but to imagine and to understand just how many young men are looking at some point on Jordan Peterson's website or on the Men Going Their Own Way spaces and others where, these are not other men. And I think we sometimes in our progressive policies and views tend to put these men way out there instead of saying they're us. We've got to reach out to them, talk to them, have dialogue that doesn't just push us back into the polarization. Next one, please. And I think we had a lot of conversation about care work, and Nikki from our team talked about the Men Care campaign and some of our conclusions from there. And I think we've done fantastic conversations in Europe and beyond about paternity leave and how do we get men to take it up. But I think we've got to go further than that. I'm encouraged by something of a 5-country study we just did with Oxfam around caregiving during COVID, which on the one hand shows that inequality continues, but that men are doing more. And interestingly, across those 5 countries that included middle and lower income and upper income countries, is that men are reporting they're happier. In spite of this economic stress, many men reporting they're happier than before COVID if they're home caring for their children. So I think there is something about how do we engage men into caregiving as something that is good for us as well, and bringing men into the broader care agenda that's not just the care of our biological children, but also in terms of supporting paid care work, being the voters for childcare the way that women have historically been. Bringing men into elder care. In the US, men are doing 40% of the care of elders. How do we make that more visible and part of caregiving that says this is part of your life? You cannot separate this from your identity. Next one, please. Move to concluding. I think we also have to talk about men's vulnerabilities in health and do it in a way that is not oppositional. It's not about calling attention or taking away from attention to women's health or children's health. It is to say we need to think about men's health as well. If I look at where I live in Washington, D.C., white men have, that is me, has an average life expectancy 17 years longer than African-American men in Washington, D.C. And men of all races having lower life expectancy than women in quite dramatic ways, not 17 years, but 5 to 6 years. I think we need to be able to talk about those men's health vulnerabilities without those becoming pitted against women's health, and to look at why they matter for women as well. And then specific groups of men who, ethnic minority men, low-income men, we need to be able to call out their needs without that turning into the polarization and the fights that we often see. So concluding, I know that we've got to get on to the next session. If you'll click on to the next slide. I do think we've got to think about national care plans and policies that go beyond paternity leave. I think we need national men's health agendas that are linked, not separate from women's health and children's health. We need national campaigns to engage male allyship from much earlier. We're starting far too late in our work. We need to work in our national plans of violence prevention that think about primary prevention again at the early stages. If we know that boys who witness violence at home are 3 times more likely to use it as adults when they grow up, we've got to think about the kind of psychosocial support that must start earlier and targeted to particularly boys who may be at greater risk later on. Data collection to know where men are on these things, I think we need to do much more frequently. And finally, to engage allies. We can't do this only with policy. We've been doing some work recently with the Gina Davis Institute around looking at what boys are seeing in television and finding that they're seeing women in positions of power, but they're seeing very unhealthy masculinity presented in the shows that they're most watching, particularly now during COVID. They're seeing men who only can present anger, who aren't involved in caregiving, and when they are shown as mostly incapable or incompetent caregivers. So we've got a huge, I think, we've got a huge need to engage broader society, particularly the media that boys are spending a huge amount of time on, to start even earlier, to call men into a relational way of being men, not a performatic way of being men. So I really do see a pathway forward to think, how do we start far earlier with this, and how do we engage more allies? How do we step away from some of the polarization to show men the benefits when we embrace gender equality? Thank you, and so sorry for the connectivity issues.
Thank you, Gary. I think that your last 6 points on the last slide actually summarize our panel very well. And I'm truly sorry for all the technical trouble, but I still think that we had a really good discussion at our panel. I really thank you for the contributions. Gary, Ralph, Katarina, Karin, Charles, Lopa. Thank you for joining us. It was really an adventure how to work globally with links of virtual links. But I think that in the end we succeeded very well, and I really wish you all success in promoting gender equality, more specifically the role of men and boys in there. So thank you very much from Estonia.
Thank you very much, Rait, as well, for handling this situation so fluidly. I mean, the situation was ever-changing throughout this panel, but we did a great job, so thank you. Now, just before we go on to all of those who participated in the quiz, as you probably saw, the right answer was 15.7 billion. So not the largest number we had put up there, but still quite a remarkable number when you think about it.